the most important thing that you can do now as a city, as a municipality, is to declare a climate emergency, which is something that we're seeing happening now in a number of cities across the UK and in other places, for people to say this is no longer a case of saying we need to have a gradual, over the next 40 years, reduction in CO2, but to say actually this is an emergency and we need to respond in the same way. So but we need to see, I think what we bring from the transition movement is that thing to say, if you declare a climate emergency in a city, that is the most phenomenal opportunity for imagination and creativity and connection and dreaming of what we could do instead. So there's something, I think, about that declaration of saying the times that we live in are such that they demand us to think really big and really brave and really imaginative. That is a really important catalyst for what comes next.
I would say one of the things that has been the most transformative that I've seen is when cities create spaces for meaningful dialogue between the different actors. So having the conversations happen in a place where people can really express what they need, their fears, their hopes, their ideas, and having all that being taken up by local governments, not having the relationships be unidirectional, like we decide and you complain, which often happens, but actually creating spaces for generative and regenerative dialogue. Because in the end, the most transformative thing we can do is to put relationships at the center and change the way we've been relating to one another, from mistrust to trust and empathy and companionship.
So the transition movement was something that started 12 years ago, and in a small town where I live, and is now in about 50 different countries around the world. And we like to think of it as being a movement of communities that are reimagining and rebuilding the world. So it creates a space where people can come together and they can talk about what kind of future would they like to create, what kind of future could we create now in this moment, because it's not a given that all the dystopian visions of the future that we read in the paper are inevitable. You know, it is still possible that we could create something really extraordinary and something that is much more, brings people together and meets our needs much better than the current approach. But then in transition, it's always balanced with this thing of saying, so then we need to actually go and do that and build that new world. And our take, I guess, in transition is to say we start where we are. We start in the place where we are, with the people that we have around us, with the raw resources that we have around us, and we just start with a kind of an audacious belief that if you start to do things, then other things will come in to support that, and you can start to really change the narrative that a place tells about itself. So for me, transition has always been very positive, solutions focused, looking to the future, trying to talk about that future that we could still create, but is really a movement that has its hands dirty. It's a movement which is about making new energy companies, creating new economies, setting up new food systems, creating new social systems. It's very practical and driven by a vision of how the world could be so much better than what it is today.
Yeah, so what I would say in terms of the principles of transition, which is one of the reasons that really drew me to transition, was the emphasis put on we have to know what's going on, like no fake news. Let's actually understand what's going on. Let's invite the people that need to take part in the conversation and who will be affected by whatever is decided. Let's give them a voice and let's open the space so they can fully participate. Let's get our hands dirty. Let's do things that can be visible, things that we can show to people and say, well, we're experimenting and here are the results. If you want, come join us and let's do it better together. And then the thing that I like the most is the emphasis on what we call inner transition, which is the taking care of yourself and taking care of one another, reweaving the social aspect of this kind of activist work and putting care and support at the center, which is something that I haven't really seen anywhere else. A few years ago, the buzzword was sustainability. We need to be sustainable. What did sustainability mean? Nobody really knew. We were all trying to figure it out, and some people started using it more for working towards resilience, so this capacity of adapting towards to whatever happened, and dreaming of this positive future, greening the future, and that was great. But that concept was also taken by other actors, other companies who use the idea of sustainability to just continue doing business as usual. In truth, when we talk about sustainability or resilience, the dialogue, the discourse is incomplete if we do not talk about degrowth somehow. If we talk about we need to relocalize our economy, we need to bring society together again, that means, of course, we need to reduce our dependency on external resources, one of them, the main one, of course, oil. So this whole idea of, no, don't worry, we're going to be sustainable, everything's going to stay the same because we're going to find something new, we're going to invent something, some technology, somebody will come up with something that will allow us to remain as we are. So no need to change anything. For me, that doesn't make sense given the situation of the world.
Yeah, I think the question is kind of the wrong way round because it assumes we have a choice. Because what the climate scientists say is that 80% of all of the fossil fuels we know exist have to stay in the ground if we are to have a planet that is has a chance of being habitable by our grandchildren. You know, we are seeing climate change moving so quickly, way ahead of many of the worst forecasts of 20, 30 years ago. So it's not a case of, so for me it's like, you know, as a parent, I don't feel like there's really any choice about this. You know, the reality is that we have to leave 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. So when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change say we need to see rapid, far-reaching and urgent changes to all aspects of society, for me, you know, when I hear that and so many people go, oh, you know, the thing that I love about the transition movement and the quality that I think we really need to be cultivating is that we go, fantastic, oh wow, we can reimagine everything. You know, Naomi Klein has a lovely expression. She says that there are no non-radical solutions left. So the only solutions left require reimagining and changing everything. Well, you know, if I was 18, 20, 25 now, I'd be thinking, fantastic, what an amazing time to be looking at all of this stuff and thinking we completely reimagine it. So for me, it's not a case of thinking, how do I keep my current lifestyle and keep everything like it is? What we need to be cultivating is that sense of together we can reimagine this, because firstly because our survival depends upon it, but secondly because we could create something so remarkable and extraordinary. I think if we imagine that we can do it on our own, that's quite difficult. Of course, there are things we can do as individuals. You know, we can sell our car and we can ride a bicycle and we can eat more local food and we can do those things, and they're really important that we do those things. But what I've seen over 12 years of the transition movement is that we can do so much more when we join up with even 5 other people, 10 people, 20 people in the neighborhood where we live, and we go with each other on a journey of learning about the issues, learning about the challenges, creating a space to support each other through the grief that can generate, through the anger that can generate that this is happening, but then also to dream together and to start to create projects. And what I always say to groups wherever I go is, you know, you might be doing projects that feel quite small, but you never know where the tipping point will be, where that idea, someone will see it, or someone will hear about it, or it will become the thing that really, really accelerates. And so many people I meet who have started small projects that it's the first time where they feel part of something that is moving the world in the other kind of a direction. You know, all too often we can feel overwhelmed and we can feel burnt out and we can feel exhausted, and that really doesn't do very much. And I think even if you're an activist who's very like trying to stop the worst from happening, transition is really useful as a thing to step into, to breathe, for some support, to feel like a different kind of an approach, and then maybe you step back and, you know, it's like people step in and out. But I would say that there is something as an individual where we can uncover so much more of our power and potential to really impact the world around us now, if we can find other people to do that with.
So I would say one of the first things we can do as individuals is to put a new definition to the concept of responsibility. So we are responsible for what happens. And at times it's true that we can easily believe that it's not our responsibility, it's not our fault what happens, it's, you know, it's big corporations, it's big governments, it's big something somewhere else making a mess of the world. And that is true, of course, and there is a lot that still is possible right where we are. So thinking that responsibility is something good, that is something that we need to take as adults, as people. If we want to move forward, for me that's the first step, to say, okay, I'm going to be a responsible person and I cannot let things continue this way. What am I going to do? Maybe I don't have a plan. It's okay. There are things that I can already start to see, this doesn't work, I'm going to change it. I don't feel very comfortable with this choice I made, okay, I'll make it differently the next time. And of course, the other thing we can do is look for support. So in our neighborhoods, in our towns, in the next town down the road, it doesn't matter, there are people doing this kind of work. It can very often feel overwhelming and feel that you're the only one doing this kind of changes, this kind of work that often can come across as a sacrifice, and you're not alone in doing this. And there are transition initiatives near you in almost everywhere, either called transition or permaculture or just social movements or associations or spaces where people join and talk about what really matters to them and how to respond to the problem in a way that makes sense. Because often we say, oh, this new way of doing things has come out, ideated or invented by some great organization, and that's awesome, it's amazing, we need more of that. But you know, those solutions don't often fit all the contexts, so we need to have the courage to say what happens here is for us to respond to in the most creative way, and to acknowledge that, of course, it is scary, the times we live in are scary, and we need to make space to share how we are feeling about this, and we don't need to be paralyzed by that, because there's so many possibilities for us now.
I would just add one very quick little thing to that, which is, you know, I've been involved with transition now for 12 years, and before that I was a teacher of permaculture for years before then. I never had anybody come up to me and say, you know, my life was doing really well until I started doing transition. You know, it was all going really well, and then you taught me how to grow food on my balcony, and then it was just
terrible.
You know, just like, everybody hates me now, and you know, it's like it doesn't happen.
Well, maybe their family hates them a little bit. Like,
maybe
you're a bit annoying. Like,
maybe,
shut up about saving the world.
No.
So, in the province of Barcelona, there are several transition initiatives. Actually, Catalonia is one of the most thriving areas where transition has taken root, and there are just so many different things. So there are transition initiatives that are focusing on food, on creating projects that in English they're called like Incredible Edible. So here we're calling them Increíble Comestible, and in Vice, for example, or in Cardedeu, there are many initiatives that are working with social currencies and trying very hard to relocalize the economy and boost and foster local production and consumption, which is great. And then, of course, we have everything that is happening in terms of governance, of reimagining governance, and this is something that is led by the example of the city council in Barcelona of let's create new spaces where we can decide together. And in particular, I would highlight the case of La Garrocha, for example, who it's a region that is part of a project we call Municipalities in Transition, and they have taken up the entire concept of transition and applied it to the region of 21 municipalities, and they are working in all the different aspects of bringing resilience and sustainability to the region.
I would just add to that, that actually for me, as somebody not from Spain, one of the things that, what's happened here in Barcelona and the fearless cities, the municipalist movement also in other places, in Madrid and other places, and in Grenoble in France and places, is so inspiring. It feels to me like what we tried to create in transition is that kind of bottom-up push, that sort of fermentation at the ground level of ideas and projects and possibilities. And then the municipalities in transition project that Ana mentioned is exploring what does it look like when the local government municipality comes to meet that, and when those two things work together to working towards the same thing. And for me, what's happening here in Barcelona is one of the most inspiring examples of that anywhere in the world. And the neighborhood assemblies and the different model of democracy. For me, I always think when I visit other places in the world, I always say that's what it would look like if you had your local municipality really reaching down and creating the ideal conditions in which transition can flourish, creating the ideal conditions in which change feels possible, in which the imagination feels alive. There's a lot we can do, but there's a lot that needs to come and help us. And for me, what's happening here in Barcelona is one of the best stories of that anywhere in the world, I think.